Hey Mama, welcome back to the Thrive Mama podcast. I'm Martina, certified nutrition consultant and holistic health coach, and a mama of two, and I'm so glad you're here. I am here to help busy moms unlock their energy, balance their hormones, and break out of burnout using nutrition as a foundation. On this podcast, we will dive into actionable strategies on nutrition, nervous system healing, and aligning with your cycles with a healthy dose of relatable motherhood thrown in, all designed to help you move past surviving to actually thrive in motherhood. Let's do this. My love, I'm so excited to be back with you for another episode. This week, we are making space for some listener questions. So we have 4 beautiful questions that we're going to be moving through today. I think this episode's going to be short and sweet. And if you have questions that you want answered on the podcast, there is a form below this episode where you can submit your questions for a future Q&A episode and get support, clarity, answers through that channel. So check out the link, drop your questions in for the next episode, and let's move into your beautiful listener questions for today. Question number 1 came from Beth, and Beth says, "Hi Martina, I've been hearing a lot about adrenal fatigue, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it." Girl, I have thoughts. I have a lot of symptoms: exhausted, insomnia, energy crashes, hormonal acne, weight gain. How do I know if I have adrenal fatigue, and do you have any advice for healing? Beth, thank you for this question. It's such a good one. And, I feel like adrenal fatigue had like a moment a few years ago and everyone was talking about it. And I don't hear about it as much anymore, but it is worth a conversation to get some clarity on here, what may be going on in your body. So, first, I just want to say adrenal fatigue as a term is not a recognized like medical diagnosis because your adrenals don't really like run out of steam. Like your adrenals don't stop working. They don't like run out of cortisol. If you don't know, the adrenals are these glands in the body that are responsible for producing a lot of our hormones actually, but they're really central in cortisol production. And we hear a lot about cortisol when it comes to stress, right? Cortisol is one of our main stress hormones. But cortisol is really not a bad thing. And it's not just about a stress response. It's actually designed to be anti-inflammatory. So it's kind of like the first line of defense. When the body receives a signal that something's up, something is wrong, cortisol is released to help bring it back into balance. It's actually really important and beautiful. And it does this by suppressing the immune system because cortisol comes in and is like, I'm going to take care of the problem here. Immune cells, you can go like take a seat. Now, the problem becomes when cortisol is dysregulated, is out of balance, if there's too much of it or not enough of it, we start really feeling the impact of that. So I just wanted to clarify for everybody listening, the adrenal fatigue that you hear people talk about is referring to kind of a state in the body where the stress load has become so high that now your cortisol is extremely dysregulated. So it's either way too high or its rhythm is disrupted because there's something called the HPA axis, and I'm not going to get super deep into this, but I do think it's really interesting. So the HPA axis is one of our main hormonal control centers. Think of it kind of like airport control, what do they call that? Yeah, like sky control. I don't know the exact word. My wife has her pilot's license and she's like yelling at me right now. Big towers in the sky that tell the planes where to go. Cool. So that's your HPA axis. And it's like looking big picture at the body. And it connects your hypothalamus, which is a part of the brain, your pituitary gland, which is a big center of hormone production, and your adrenals, right? HPA, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenals. So when we talk about adrenal fatigue, what we're really talking about is a hiccup in that little axis, in that triangle between the brain, the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenals. So we're talking about a dysregulation in stress response. Okay, I just wanted to clear that up for everybody here. We're not talking about the adrenal glands like shutting down and not working, but what can happen is that the signaling that tells the body to make cortisol can get out of whack. And then we don't have enough cortisol to really be thriving. And or we have way too much cortisol to really be thriving. It depends on which stage of this HPA axis dysregulation we're living with. So, in the most simple terms, let me just bring that down and make it super clear. Adrenal fatigue equals your nervous system and your hormonal system being stuck in overdrive and then sort of collapsing in a way that makes it difficult to function. So you listed already some really clear and powerful symptoms to be aware of. Folks who have adrenal fatigue tend to feel, fatigued, right? Exhausted. We have this kind of wired but tired feeling, like we're tired all the time, but also can't shut off, can't sleep, can't rest. We definitely have energy crashes throughout the day, especially in the afternoon. There's usually some anxiety, some irritability, some like hot emotions that come with this. And I also often see hormonal symptoms like with our cycles, with acne, PMS, irregular cycles, and with water retention. That's something I'm really looking at with cortisol. We've all seen the viral like cortisol face on Instagram, right? That's like oversimplistic, but we do retain water when we have high levels of cortisol. So water retention or bloating in general in the body. Those could all be some signs. But I always want to clarify for folks, the adrenals don't work isolated from the rest of the body. The adrenals are one gland on the whole body team, right? So when we're talking about adrenal fatigue, we don't want to just target the adrenals. We want to look at the entire HPA axis and we want to look really at the nervous system itself, because what's happening here is that there are signals to the body that we are unsafe, that we need our defense squad, that we need to like deploy the cortisol soldiers. And those signals are coming fast and hot and loud nonstop. And that is a nervous system issue. So if you're trying to figure out, do I have this HPA axis dysregulation? Is this going on in my body? One thing I will say is the supports I'm about to talk to, like literally would help almost all of us. So I'm less concerned about giving it a label and more concerned about using your body and your energy as a guide. If it helps you to get clarity, like from a medical professional or from blood work, I'll give you some ways to do that. But all of the suggestions I'm about to make would help literally all of us find more regulation and safety in the body. So if you're feeling any of these symptoms I'm listing, and Beth, if you're feeling this may be an area for you to support, I would encourage you to just jump right into the supports that I'm talking about. But you can certainly test cortisol in the body. I think the most helpful way to look at cortisol is through this 4-point curve, they call it, which is where you check cortisol at 4 different key points throughout the day. You can totally do that. Dutch tests are also really comprehensive. A Dutch test is a hormonal test that looks at a really wide range of hormones. It actually uses your urine instead of your blood, so you get a lot more accurate numbers, looking at long-term patterns, and you can see really nuanced interactions between cortisol and the rest of your hormones. So those would be 2 things you could ask your provider about, would be checking your cortisol, the 4-point curve, and or the Dutch test. Not all doctors work with those tests, so you'll need to ask around to find someone who does. So let's talk about a few supports. And of course, my usual little disclaimer here is that the body is highly nuanced and individual. You know, there's always so much more that I'm able to answer in like a 5-minute little podcast response. But here are a few big bullet points, Beth, that I want to invite you into, and anyone else listening who's resonating with this experience of potentially cortisol and adrenal kind of dysregulation. Number 1, it's annoying to hear because I know you've heard it from me, you've heard it from others, but it's the nervous system. It is. It's creating safety and capacity in the nervous system, which happens in 2 ways. Number 1 is lessen the stressors coming from your environment. Okay. And then the second way is increase capacity in your body to respond to the stress. And I really recommend you do both. Reduce the stressors, but also increase capacity because life be life it. There's always going to be things going on, demands on our system. Some of my favorite tools are, breath work, meditation, nature time and nature therapy, somatic release, like dance in the body or shaking or sort of guided somatic practices. Sleep quality and quantity is going to be really important for nervous system healing. So protecting that as much as you can. Music, I mean, there's so many nervous system tools that I teach inside my programs, but those are a few big ones you can start feeling into for yourself and seeing what we need to do to help the body feel safe in its environment and increase the capacity for safety in the nervous system. Both are really, really important. The adrenals also work so closely with the circadian rhythm. So this is the daily clock inside of our body. I mean, so many cells in the body, really, the digestive cells and the brain cells and liver cells, like they're all doing different things at different times a day, right? The adrenal cells are no exception, and cortisol works on a schedule. We have naturally high and low levels of cortisol throughout the day. And it's really important that we get the circadian rhythm in balance when we're dealing with HPA axis things. It's just really, really critical and foundational. So we're talking about really basic circadian supports, early morning sunlight, sunset, being outside at sunset, having sunlight breaks throughout the day, really limiting and protecting yourself from blue light, like on your devices, wearing blue light blocking glasses, all super important. Sleep quality and sleep hygiene. It's really important to remember number of hours of sleep is not the same as restorative sleep. So really protecting your circadian rhythm. There's a lot of other strategies that we can go into there, but those are a few I'll just leave you with. Is lots of sunshine, lots of high quality sleep at the right times, and really limiting protecting ourselves from blue light when we can. And then the last thing, of course, is nutrition support, right? Your cortisol is built out of micronutrients and different compounds from our food. So we want to make sure that the adrenals and the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, they all have the nutrients they need, and that the nervous system has the nutrients it needs to feel super safe, right? So when it comes to food, the adrenals use B vitamins, like the family of B vitamins, magnesium, vitamin C, to actually create cortisol. Like they need those micronutrients to create cortisol. And if we don't have them, cortisol gets dysregulated. So especially if you're under high levels of stress, you're just in a high stress season, a high stress job, you're going to need more B vitamins, magnesium, and vitamin C. So I would really look at foods like leafy green vegetables, like daily, multiple times a day, leafy green vegetables, the spinach, the kale, the bok choy, the arugula, like dark leafy greens. Things like avocado, lentils, quinoa, pumpkin seeds, black beans, bell peppers, kiwi, like those would all be really, really supportive foods that I would be recommending multiple times a week, if not every single day, while you're supporting your healing process. And then adaptogens are also going to be your best friend, my love. So adaptogens, it doesn't just like override the current stress levels in your body, but it does help support the capacity of your nervous system to handle the stress. So looking at herbs like ashwagandha, which would be beautiful maybe even before bed to help with sleep quality. Holy basil or tulsi would also be really, really beautiful throughout the day to help support the adrenals. Maca has also been shown to support pituitary gland function in general. So maca would be, because the adrenals don't work alone, they're in this axis with the pituitary gland, I would also look at maca as a support. So those are a few things I would say about adrenal fatigue. And just know it's really important not to push through these symptoms or this season of exhaustion that you're in. Adrenal fatigue as a whole, this HPA axis goes way beyond like, I didn't get enough sleep and I'm tired. This is like daily exhaustion, daily like running on fumes, fatigue, and dysregulation in the body that's just going to keep spiraling unless we can start creating safety in your system. So Sending you so much love as you navigate that. I know that there's a lot there, and I'm sending you so much support from here. Our next question comes from Sarah, and Sarah says, Hi, Martina. I have been loving your podcast lately. Thanks, Sarah. And I wanted to drop this question in. Is there a time of my cycle that coffee is not as harmful on my body? I've heard you talk before about how it's not the best for me, but I'm struggling with the idea of giving it up completely and curious where it could fit into my cycle. Thank you. Much love. What a great question, Sarah, because yes, there actually is a time of your cycle where we will be more resilient to the effects of caffeine and coffee on our cortisol, on our hormones, on our inflammation levels, on our energy production. We can like drink it with more stability at certain times of your cycle. So what I would say is you can start experimenting with having coffee, if it feels good, in your follicular and ovulation phase. So in this sort of first half of your cycle where your estrogen is highest, your progesterone is lower, and you are actually the most stress resilient during that phase. The second half of your cycle, the luteal and menstrual phase, is when we have no stress buffer. So any sort of stressor on our body is going to be felt in a much bigger, deeper way, including caffeine. So this is a time where, if possible, we want to limit intense caffeine loads so that the liver and our energy cell production can like stay sort of balanced and spacious as much as possible. And I know this is tricky because for most of us, the luteal and menstrual phase is when we feel the most tired. So it's when you're going to reach for caffeine the most because we want/need it the most. So this is where it's really, really important to cycle sync your calendar, your sleep, your exercise, the expectations you have on yourself, and your nutrition. I'm not going to go super deep into all of this. There's a whole episode on the luteal phase, episode 20. You can go back and listen to, and it goes a lot deeper. But if we are not eating enough or eating enough of the right things in the luteal phase, we're going to feel freaking exhausted and we're going to reach for more coffee, which is going to cause more of a cortisol impact, more of a blood sugar response, more of a stress response. So the key is not more coffee in that phase. The key is more spaciousness, more sleep, more grace and compassion with where we are in our capacity, and more nourishment, more protein, more fiber, more food. We need more calories. So go back and listen to episode 20 and experiment with less coffee in the luteal menstrual phase. So thank you for that question, Sarah, and I'd be so curious to hear how that works for you moving forward. Our next question is from Anonymous, and Anonymous asks, are adaptogens safe during breastfeeding? You share about adaptogens a lot, and I definitely need the extra energy. I've even heard that some herbs could help with milk supply, but then there's lots of mixed information on if it's safe during breastfeeding or not. Yes, there sure is, Anonymous. So here's my take on adaptogens and breastfeeding. The reason there's all this mixed information is because there is just limited data on safety in pregnancy and breastfeeding in general. And it like makes sense why that is. There's some ethics involved with intentionally testing substances in pregnancy and breastfeeding to find out if they're safe, because there's this element of like, okay, we have to have a control group, we have to have like different doses, and there is a real risk of side effects, of harm, and we need to be really careful when we're looking at pregnant women and babies. So there's just a huge hesitation to do the studies in the first place, which makes sense, but it also leaves us a little bit in the dark of like, okay, then how do we use these things that could be super helpful? So I just want to share my like sort of big picture process of when I'm looking at herbs. First, I dive into what research there is, and or I talk to an herbalist who I trust, and I encourage you to connect with an herbalist in your area that you trust who has done the research and the learning and can offer me their sort of expert opinion as well. But I also dive into whatever research does exist, on like PubMed or wherever you're looking at research, and look at it through the lens of, is there a concern about true known side effects? Or is the concern lack of data? Because those to me are two different things. When there's a concern about true potential side effects, that is definitely worth pausing, looking at the data, like making sort of informed, cautious decisions around. When the only noted concern is we don't have enough data, that to me is not saying don't do it. It's just saying we don't know. We don't know, which isn't the same as don't do it. And what I tend to do in those cases is start to look at how did traditional cultures use this herb? That to me is really, really informative. How have humans been using this herb intuitively over the past tens of thousands of years? Because for every herb, there is a culture that honored and used that herb in their practices, and we can learn a lot about how they used it. These traditional cultures were incredibly wise, even without these like double-blind studies. They knew what herbs would be supportive for what, which ones to avoid, and over tens of thousands of years developed a rich practice with that. And there is an element of trust that I have for how traditional cultures, how humans have used a plant for tens of thousands of years with like no, if there were huge side effects, would that culture have been using it consistently? No. So that to me is really helpful. When there's a lack of data in modern science, look at traditional cultures. So all of that to say, when it comes to breastfeeding in particular, there's a few adaptogens that I am not concerned about using in breastfeeding and that I even use personally in my breastfeeding journey. A few that you would be totally safe exploring would be ashwagandha, reishi, maca, holy basil, even like shatavari is a really beautiful adaptogen, and it's actually would be really great for your postpartum hormones and for potentially milk supply. That's one that traditional culture has used a lot with new mamas. So those like, what did I just say? Five? Those five, ashwagandha, reishi, holy basil, maca, shatavari, are ones that would be really supportive for your energy, for your stress, and even potentially for your milk supply, and are ones that I feel totally comfortable using postpartum and while breastfeeding. Again, there are no clear studies that prove those herbs are safe, but there's also no known side effects, and these are herbs that traditional cultures have been using for tens of thousands of years. A couple adaptogens that I would recommend avoiding during breastfeeding, or at least using with caution and with expert guidance, more stimulating adaptogens like rhodiola is pretty stimulating, or Panax ginseng, any kind of ginseng really, is pretty stimulating, could be potentially a bit intense for breastfeeding, maybe even drying for your milk supply. So the more stimulating ones I would be really cautious with. The more gentle ones I have no concerns with, and I think could be really, really supportive. So thank you for bringing in that question. Really beautiful and really important. Okay, loves, our last question today is coming from our listener, Kate. And Kate asks, I understand if you can't go into this on the podcast. Don't worry, Kate, I can. But I'm really struggling with deciding the best form of birth control to use. I care about my hormones and my health, but I also really don't want a pregnancy right now. And it seems like there are no great options. Thank you. Kate, I feel you. I feel you. Now, I'm going to keep this really big picture as our listening Q&A episode, and you guys let me know if you want like a full episode breakdown on the pros and cons of different birth control and how I would recommend using or not using it, because there's a lot here, as I'm sure you can imagine. There's a lot here, but I do want to answer your question directly, Kate. So first, I just want to say birth control is a highly personal decision. And you're right in a way, Kate, that there is no like perfect option for everyone. There's just not. I have not found a single form of birth control that I believe is the right one across the board. It is highly personal and is a decision that needs to be made with information. Like, I want you to be informed about the pros and cons, but also want you to make it with zero judgment, zero guilt, and full empowerment in yourself to make that decision, okay? So that's my disclaimer. The only thing we're doing here is collecting information to make the best decision for us. There is zero judgment and zero morality involved in this conversation. So let me start by just really directly answering your question of like what my recommendation is for birth control. This depends a bit on where your priorities are in this season of life. How much time, energy, and effort do you have to put into your birth control process? How critical is it that it is like 100% effective? How much margin of error do you feel comfortable with in your birth control methods? That's really important. Yeah, I think the like effort and time and energy is the other really important one. How easy do you need this to be? Or how committed are you to making something work if it's better for your body, even if it is more work? So those are things for you to reflect on. I would say when it comes to your health and your hormones, the best birth control method is going to be fertility awareness method, cycle syncing and awareness, and tracking your fertile days so you know exactly when you're fertile, and using barrier methods or other methods of birth control on your fertile days. So that would be overall the best for your health. But here's the thing, that is a lot of work. There's a lot of nuance to it. If you have cycle irregularities, it can be really challenging, if not impossible. And it takes a lot of devotion and commitment that not everyone has capacity for in every season of life. So that's all worth noting. Just because it is the best for your hormones does not mean it's the best for your life. Okay. So let's say you still care about your hormones and health here, you want to prioritize them, but that is not something you're ready to dive into right now, is this fertility awareness method or tracking in that depth. I would say copper IUDs would be my next preferred form of birth control when it comes to your health and hormones, because what we're looking for here is a type of birth control that does not interfere with ovulation. The most important thing for me is that we protect ovulation and your body's cycle. So we want to prevent pregnancy without shutting down your cycles. We need to continue cycling. We want our ovulation to occur so that we have enough progesterone, we have enough hormonal thriving and balance to protect our health long term. And many traditional birth control methods are going to shut down ovulation. So if you're currently on any kind of birth control, this is the question I want you to go look into. Does my form of birth control stop my cycles? Does it stop me from ovulating? Even if you're bleeding on your birth control, you may not be ovulating. So that's worth asking your doctor about, or going into Google's or Chat GPTs and start doing some research on if your form of birth control lets you ovulate or not. Copper IUDs typically do not interfere with ovulation, but the copper changes the pH balance in your vaginal tissues and in your fluids, and it does not let sperm survive past that point. So it is pretty effective. It does not require a lot of ongoing effort. Now, some people do still have side effects with copper IUDs because you are absorbing quite a bit of copper into your body from the IUD. So it's not risk-free, it's not side effect-free. It can still impact hormones because of now the imbalance in minerals. Your vaginal tissues are extremely absorbent. So putting something in there that's secreting copper is going to impact your body. However, when I look big picture at other forms of birth control, and I really respect reproductive freedom and the need to have sovereignty in your choices around your family, like that to me, we can look at a give and take there around maybe it's not completely perfect, but it is a better option than many others when it comes to my hormones and my health. So those are two I would recommend looking into. If you guys want like a full episode on birth control options, ways you can support the body on different forms of birth control, we could for sure have that conversation. I'm so here for that. But those are two options I would look into, my love. So, really fun questions this week. Thank you all for dropping in your questions. I have a couple more saved for our next episode. So if I didn't answer your question this week, stay tuned. She's still coming. And if you want your question answered, check out the form below this episode. Get your question in so that we can get you the support that you need here on the podcast. The last thing I want to tell you before we close out is the doors to Thrive Mama are opening really soon. Like really soon, within the next few weeks. We're going to be really deep in that portal of inviting new mamas in. So now is the time to start planting some seeds with yourself, with your family, if you're feeling called into deeper support around your body, your nervous system, your thriving, your nourishment, all of the beautiful themes that we talk about here on this podcast. Thrive Mama is like the little transformational portal that gets you out of survival mode and into deep thriving in your body and in your health. It's a group coaching program, so it's also the most affordable way to work together deeply. And this round of Thrive Mama is going to be really special. We're actually expanding it in a brand new way. More details to come, but just know this round is unique because I am adding quite a bit more to the program, and we're not raising the prices yet. This will be the round where we're experimenting with some of these new additions and seeing what's going to stay long term. And in future rounds, the price will definitely reflect these additions. So this round is going to be really the sweet spot of you get more and the price isn't budging, probably for the last time. So if you've been feeling called into Thrive Mama, into support, coaching, nervous system transformation, really building sustainable habits with your food, your nourishment, your health, your self-care, and motherhood, I really want to invite you in. There will be more details to come, but I want you to stay tuned, and I just want to start planting the seeds because I know for many of us, these decisions require processing conversations with our partners and our families, and this is the time for those conversations. So when doors open, you'll feel really clear on if this is the moment for you in this season of your life. So thanks for tuning in today, my love. If you found this conversation helpful, please take a moment, hit the subscribe, give me a like, drop your comments, your reflections, your questions down below this episode. All of the connection points really help spread this episode to those who need it, and I just love connecting with you. So let's use the space to do it. We will be back next week with another episode, and until then, take beautiful care of yourself.